Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about family systems. And the reason family systems is usually included in this course, it's really just an intro to family systems because there's an entire course just on family systems theory. So this is kind of the introduction to family systems theory. Maybe you've already have it, or maybe you're taking that other course right now. Uh, but before um, before we integrated, uh, family systems was required for clinical mental health, but not always for school counseling, because school counseling had some other courses that were required instead. So I figured at least you'd get it in the theories course if you were in school counseling. But now I think we redesigned the curriculum so everybody can take family systems. I'm pretty sure. Anybody in school counseling? No? Just wondering if, I don't know. I think it's required. We'll see. Uh, and at any rate, this is kind of your intro. You're going to get some basics. And so if when you look in the notes, you're going to see key figures. And there are dozens of family systems theories. Uh, and, dozens of theorists as well. But I just picked the most well-known, the most prominent, the most used family systems. Um, there are some new theories like IFS, things like that. Uh, I don't think Corey might have mentioned that in his newest book, but he doesn't have like a chapter or anything on it. It may be in some of the newer family counseling books that are just on family counseling, family systems. But one of the very first theorists is considered Alfred Adler, uh, primarily for, his sibling order and his look at family relationships. But he was really one of the first people that, rather than just blaming parents for an individual's issues, or as he would call them, neuroses, uh, Adler really looked at, overcoming issues, uh, whether they be a result of family or not. Um, I think, honestly, I don't know a family that doesn't have some issues. Uh, and, you know, when you take the family systems course, the first thing we tend to do is to look at our own families. And it's the same thing with diagnosis. First, we look at ourselves, and then we calm down and we realize, no, it's everybody in my family that has these diagnoses. So, but we're not going to get into Adler because we had a whole class just on Adler. But just know that he's considered one of the first uh, theorists to consider family systems. And probably uh probably the theory with the most detail in your notes, and the one we'll talk about the most tonight, will be Murray Bowen. And I guess my only complaint about Bowen is that I think he's got some really insightful things in his theories. And I like what he has to say. It's just he points out issues and how to identify issues, but he doesn't really give us as many solutions to those problems. And I guess later on, people took all of his theories and talked about, okay, so this is what we're going to do about it. But, his original books really talked about issues with the family system. Um, the one of the things that I had to do when I took the family systems course was we had to write a paper, but it was done in steps. One of the first things we did was a genogram, and it's something that I found so valuable that I do it with my clients who have family issues. And we do it together. We work on the genogram together. And I go into a lot of detail. I don't just talk about emotional issues. I also talk about maybe physical issues like cancer, things like that. I had a couple clients who, when they talked about how relatives died, they might have identified 3 generations of breast cancer, for example, and they didn't realize that they might be at risk as well, and so they went and checked that out and everything just to be safe. But you'll notice all of these things that you might not have realized before. Another thing is addiction, you know, and I've had so many clients, see it in front of them on paper. Oh, look at that line of addiction, maybe on dad's side, my dad, his dad, my grandfather, a whole line of alcoholism or addiction. And they're like, wow, maybe that's where I get it from. And then also abuse, you know. There could be a whole line of history in one family line of abuse. The other thing that's really interesting, and this takes a little more knowledge, is codependency. And we're going to talk about codependency. But you can see that that is passed on multi-generationally as well. So tonight, we're just going to give some highlights on Murray Bowen. That'll be the big one. My other favorite theorist is Virginia Satir. And you can find a lot of her videos on YouTube of her working with families. And I just like her personality, I guess. Carl Whitaker, Salvador Minuchin, Jay Haley, Chloe Maddens. We'll just give you a little highlights of those. Another thing that I do with clients is I work on them with a timeline of life events. And this would be life events that are positive, like weddings, births, things like that. Graduations, but also negatives, was somebody ill or died, was somebody incarcerated or go into foster care or something like that, whatever happened. But it not only helps me get a visual of their family makeup, but it really helps the client to see things in an organized way. And it helps them delineate positive, negative events in their lives. It helps them to see repetition, that timeline of events, things like that. So those are the two kind of activities that I do with clients almost every time when they have family issues. Another thing I had to do in that class was share, just like you're going to share your individual theory of counseling, we had to choose a family systems theory of counseling as well. And I included that whole paper in your notes. And you can see examples of all types of diagrams that go along with every single theory we talk about. So you can see an example of a genogram, things like that. So, and I'll share that with you. So let's look at Murray Bowen. His theory is called multi-generational family systems theory. I think the most important things to remember are his 8 key concepts. And so we're going to talk about those. And so differentiation of the self, psychological separations of independence and emotion. Differentiation of the self is a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. We don't want to be undifferentiated. So later on, they came up with the term codependent, and codependent has a lot to do with individuals who are not differentiated. So I think, Bowen really came up a lot. He wasn't the only one, but he really wrote about that concept. He didn't use the term codependency until much later. So if you've ever read a book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, he talks about differentiation in kind of a creative way. And so, he writes this book, and this person goes to a village, and people in the village ask him different questions, and he kind of gives this sage advice or answer to them. And he usually used metaphors to do that. And so one of the questions was, what is a healthy marriage or relationship? And so many times I hear in wedding ceremonies and things like that, or romance, that 2 people become one. That is not healthy. So, somebody asked, in Khalil Gibran's book, what is a relationship or marriage or things like that? And he says, marriage is like a temple, and the temple needs pillars to hold up that roof, that structure. And 2 people in a relationship are like pillars holding up a roof. But if they get too close together and become one, it cannot support it and it falls. Or if they get too far apart, it also will fall in the middle. And so, they have to be individuals, but they have to be partners in, holding up that relationship. And, I think that's a good illustration of differentiation of self in a positive relationship. And, so we have to have our own independence, and yet we have to have commitment and relationship and working together as partners. And that's why I like that word, partners in a relationship. So undifferentiated individuals are too close, and their personal value relies on basically the evaluation or feedback from the other individual. So that's called fused, or later it's called enmeshed. And so they're fused with the other individual's emotional patterns, or other people in the family. So, there's a really nice book that came out. Millions have been published, millions of copies, and I pick them up at yard sales for 50 cents all the time and give them to students who may need them. And I'm like, they're like, oh, what should I read for candidacy? Maybe you'd like this book. It's called Codependence No More. Codependency No More. And it's a pretty famous book, and I think people like reading it as well. And so, um, you know, the thing with codependent relationships is it's really tied to what Bowen calls multi-generational family systems. And that's when all of these tendencies, issues get get handed down to their children. Because what other relationship is modeled for children other than their parents or guardians relationship? So that's what they feel comfortable with, even if it's dysfunctional. And they don't know another healthier kind of relationship. So let's talk a little bit about that, what that might look like. And so, I think that when when an individual's self-worth uh, relies on another person's approval, they lack individuation or self-acceptance. And, I believe that we all, just like Rogers would say, we all deserve unconditional positive regard and acceptance for who we are, mistakes and all. But a lot of times, if our self-worth or value is conditional, upon somebody else's acceptance or non-acceptance, uh, you know, that's one sign of a codependent relationship. Because our own emotions and value or self-worth depends on another person's feedback, praise or criticism, or their mood. So for instance, if they're in a bad mood, maybe it's our fault. Well, maybe it isn't. But um, that means that our emotions are fused with the other individual's emotions as well. Because they probably learned this from parents or guardians, they feel very comfortable with that dynamic. And because they don't really know a different, more healthy dynamic. And one interesting thing is that people who are codependent really find each other, you know? And it's like there's magnets, they're drawn to each other. So I've had clients who don't even know each other. They came on different days. And one of them says, "Oh, I'm in a new relationship." I'm like, "Are you ready for a new relationship?" And my answer is no, but their answer is yeah. And they're like, "Hey, I think it's always been meant to be. This is like, you know, uh, one true love." And it's like I've always known them. In fact, I think you know them. I think they're a client of yours that comes on another day. And this happens over and over again. And you know, and the type of um, therapy it really happens in is addictions, because many times one person in a codependent relationship uh, really enables the other person who might have an addiction. And so addiction is, or some specific issue is often a part of a codependent relationship. It could be alcoholism, it could be addiction of something else, it could be abuse, it could be certain uh, personality diagnoses. Um, Lots of different things could fit into that category. But one of the things with an enabler is they often want to save the other person or change the other person or rescue the other person. Oh, if you only knew them, all they need's a hug. That's it. Everything will be better. And uh, you know, or I can help them change, you know. Well, that's up to the individual, you know. Nobody can really make another person change. Uh, and so, you know, I think that's one area we really see that in. So think about it this way. Think about parents who are codependent, and one of them may have an addiction or be extremely controlling or perhaps abusive in some way or have a mental illness. And the other person is dependent on them for positive feedback and enables them in some way. Oh, don't bother dad until I get him his after work drink and you know he gets to relax for a little while. Then we'll have dinner, and after dinner you can talk with him. So it's kind of the 1950s scenario, you know, the mom's taking her Valium, you know. So, but you know, so think about it, you know, people grow up in this nuclear family, and this is what they learn. So when they become adults themselves or young adults, and they meet somebody else from a similar dysfunctional family system, they're very comfortable because the expectations are the same. They know what to expect. They know how to act. They've been through all this. And so it's like they know them already. You know, it's like they've known them their entire lives. And things move very fast. First, they're really close friends because, you know, they really need each other. And, you know, and so the relationship moves fast. They move in together really fast. Everything is magical. It was meant to be. It's true love. And uh, then something happens, and there's a little bit of anxiety, you know? I mean, we can only be phony for a few months, and then our real selves, our masks begin to be removed, and people see our real selves. And so tension begins to rise, you know? And so we bring in what's called number two, triangulation. Triangulation is anxiety that may occur in a relationship, but some third party is brought in to relieve that anxiety. And it could be an in-law, could be a friend. Often it's a puppy or a cat. And oh, look how cute. Can we keep them? And puppies are great, but somebody's got to clean up after them. Somebody's got to take them out. You can't travel the same way. So at first it's wonderful and there's joy and oh, look at this. And but it ends up being more stress, and the stress rises even higher. And then, oh, it's been about a year. Let's have a kid. 9 months of wonder and anticipation, and maybe we won't drink during that time. And you know, although in you know in the 50s and 60s, smoke and drinking was perfectly acceptable. My IQ would be crazy if my mom didn't drink and smoke while she was pregnant. But you know, I think that often happens. And then when the child's born, oh, it's wonderful, it's beautiful, and then it's waking me up all night long, and we add sleep deprivation to this list, and changing diapers, and more financial difficulties, and tension even gets raised higher. And then we move on to what is called emotional cutoff. And that's when people, instead of yelling and screaming and dealing with the tension, they kind of like back off, you know, and cut themselves off emotion. But if we cut ourselves off emotionally from the negative emotions, we also cut ourselves off from the positive emotions as well. No anger, but no love either. So, you know, then the person begins to isolate and feel lonely, even though they're still living together. One person might go to work all the time or, lean into that addiction a little more to escape. And the other one is like taking care of the kid and the dog and maybe picking up another job, and they're exhausted and stressed out and there's no love. And then they meet somebody at work. And you know what? That friend, boy, it's like I knew them my entire life. Maybe, maybe this was meant to be, but I don't know. I'm still married. I'm still living with this other person. But it was just meant to be. And so they end the other relationship. They've already in a new relationship. Everything's fantastic and new and, great expectations. And the entire cycle repeats itself because they just entered a new codependent relationship. And their children are learning codependency as well. So we move into the multi-generational transmission process, the concept of, describing how all of these different things with their parents are passed on to their offspring, and it leads to multiple generations of dysfunction and codependency and unhealthy family systems. And it tends to get worse with each generation unless somebody breaks the cycle. Yeah, so that's kind of the cycle of codependency. And the nuclear family emotional system, that's people's attitudes and beliefs about relationships, what roles they play, what patterns come out. And it's kind of the forces that drive the relationship or the emotional system of the relationship. Family projection. Family projection is the way that parents transmit emotional issues to their children. So it's not just codependency. They may project other emotional issues or cause other emotional issues in their offspring. Sibling position. Bowen talks about this as well, but it's really not as specific as Adler. Adler has really specific tendencies for sibling position, and Bowen's a little more general, and it's really sibling position may cause differences, in tendencies or attitudes or responses to siblings or lack of siblings. And the last one he talks about is societal regression. And this is also called societal emotional process. So he believes, and I fully believe this as well, that not only does his theory apply to families, but it also applies to non-familiar relationships and groups as well. So it could apply to the dynamics in a workplace, maybe dynamics in a friendship group, or dynamics in a school classroom, because so the family is like this, small unit where it all began, but everybody carries these roles and beliefs into any relational system, whether it be work or school or friendships. And so you can kind of see it playing out you know, especially like if you're in an office and you're working with the same people all day, every day, and you see these patterns and how people react to one another and respond emotionally. And you've got people who don't want to say no. They tend to do a lot of work. You've got people who tend to escape and make excuses or get high at lunch. You've got, you know, all different roles being played out that they learned in their family systems. And so, you know, those are kind of the 8 key concepts. I did include a page in your note just on triangulation because it's such an important concept, and just on the nuclear family emotional system. And there's 4 concepts just under the nuclear family emotional system: marital conflict, dysfunction in one spouse, impairment of one or more children, or emotional distancing. But you can read through your notes on those. And I was just wondering if anybody had any interesting examples of Bowen's theory. Nothing? Amazing. All right. Well, go ahead.
My my mom and I are both morning people, and my sister is not. And so all of our lives, that's been like mostly it's funny and like a healthy dynamic around it now, but like in high school and stuff, that was like there was a lot of tension around we were like upsetting her and being too much of the morning team in my sister's space. So I don't know if that really like fits with this, but came to mind.
Yeah. 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 How did that come up that like morning work was like better than late night work? Who came up with that?
Yeah, like driving at night.
It's like, uh, you know, when I worked in a school, it was like a competition who could get to school earlier, you know, and you could tell because they always had the best parking spaces, you know, in a school parking lot. Whereas in Japan, you always knew who got there first because they parked the furthest away. And that's because, out of consideration, if somebody was running late, they should park closest to the building so they're not late to work. It's a totally different concept. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Got me thinking about my work situation where I work at a school for kids with special needs, and like there's multiple aides in my classroom, and so many like a few of the other aides are just all like friends, and they are so gossipy and like they talk crap on the teacher, and it's so annoying. And I'm like, can we just like be here for our kids? Like, why are we being like they're middle aged, and I'm just like, why are we like this?
Yeah. So aides in the classroom, but have you ever gone to the teacher's lunchroom? Because it's a nightmare. I tried to stay away from that. Yeah. Adults are still grown up children. That is exactly right. Yeah. And it would be great if we're talking about being playful and creative, but no, we're talking about dysfunctional family systems. Anybody online want to share? All right. Well, let's look at the next theory then. So the next theory is Virginia Satir, and I love watching her videos on YouTube of family systems therapy. And she believes that you could either have functional communication patterns or dysfunctional communication patterns. And I remember in a previous relationship, my partner's parents were one was from Italy and one was from Germany. And, you know, it, she would always be talking with them about dysfunctional family systems for obvious reasons. And, you know, and finally, I realized that they thought that they couldn't translate the word dysfunctional, and they thought she was saying just functional, and being just functional was good enough for them. So, but yeah, so Satir believed that relationships were all about communication. And um, if things weren't working out, then some part of the communication pattern was not functioning properly. And one of the things that she did was she would move people around. She would sit people by other members of the family, and they'd either be really comfortable or really uncomfortable, depending on, the communication pattern and the relationship. And um, she thought that we should not placate others, like, oh, of course, you're right, let's do that, whatever. Because we lose who we are if we're too agreeable. We shouldn't blame one another, just as Glasser said, blaming doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't change the past. It doesn't change the present. All it does is create defensiveness. Being super reasonable is really just striving for control. So, I've heard a lot of political discussions between partners lately, and each one trying to be super reasonable and kind and let me enlighten you, you and explain this in great detail so that you can understand it. But it's really just striving for control rather than letting the person be free. Irrelevant behavior, or it's more like distractions. And changing the subject really. It could be I'm tired of arguing. Hey, you know what? We haven't had dinner. Don't worry about making dinner. What's your favorite restaurant? Yeah, let's go there. But it doesn't actually solve the problem. We have family roles and trials. So I think one of the things she's most famous for is not communication, but coming up with family roles. Each person in that family system plays a different role. And, my older sister was always the peacekeeper. And over the years, I've taken on different roles, and little brother had a different role. And, but this was later used extensively with addiction. And of course, it fit very well because addiction is often part of codependency and dysfunctional family systems. So, what role did you play in your family system? Were you the rescuer? Were you the scapegoat? What was the role? And then the different techniques, family sculpting. She could do this using talk and imagery, but she could actually stand people up and have them either pose themselves. Like one of the most powerful ones I saw was that, she had one person get up and pose her partner, you know, uh, if they were angry, she had like a fist raised and told them what kind of facial expression to have. And, and then she got down on the floor and cowered with her hands up for protection. And, when people are not in those emotional states, having them physically sculpted in that situation not only allows them to better understand how they are portraying themselves and expressing themselves to the other partner, but it allows them to see their partner's reaction in a less emotional way so that they can better understand and have empathy for how they're feeling when they are experiencing heightened emotions. So then you can actually then have them resculpt things, either when things are going better or what they would like to see, and it might be standing side by side, holding hands. It could be, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It could be very simple. And family reconstruction, kind of identifying miscommunication and changing it to be better understood or better expressed, and being able to communicate better and changing these family roles, and so reconstructing the family in a more positive and healthy way. So I think her theory really did have a lot of impact on the family systems field. And I liked her personality too. I think you'll too. It's like she's not wishy-washy, she's tough, but she's also positive, so it's a nice mix. It's a nice mix. And so Carl Whitaker, the next theorist, he became well known because he did a lot of instructional videos, and he would present at conferences, and he would always do a live session so that people could see it. Sometimes he would work with a co-leader and and he was very good at family therapy, but he didn't really have an organized theory of his own. He came up with some interesting techniques, like if he was talking with a co-therapist, sometimes he would have a dialogue with the co-therapist. Can you believe he talks to her that way? Even in public, even in therapy? How would your partner react if you talk to her that way? Something like that. And at first they don't get that they're actually talking to them, and it takes them a little while to figure out what's happening. But it does draw out new insights, realizations about what other people might be seeing, And, so some of the things he's famous for are exploring family secrets. We don't share that with the neighbors. We don't share our dirty laundry with the neighbors, you know. Um, I'm not telling my neighbors about grandma's secret medicine in the top of her closet. I might be taking some and watering it down when I was a kid, but all part of a dysfunctional family system. But every family has some secrets, you know. They may create turmoil in a session just to see the dynamics and then help the family work through it. But he doesn't focus on any specific theory. So there's not a lot we can do with that other than take family secrets as huge. Every family has some secrets. And even though the kids might not be told we don't share this with other people, sometimes they do anyway. And then we call children and youth And, you know, all right. Uh, Salvador Minuchin, structural family therapy. He liked a lot of diagramming. And so who relates to who? What's the power structure in the family? What's the family organization? Who has power? Who doesn't? Are there family rules? Like nobody talks to dad before he's got his cocktail. Uh, so each family system has subsystems and boundaries and power structures. My kids know who to go to depending on what their wants are. And they did figure out that triangulation doesn't work. But, you know, so he came up with all kinds of different family mapping, and you map out the family structures with the client so that they can observe it as well. And he wanted to do reenactments of conflict in the session, and they replay conflict and then they work it out. And Minuchin wants to change the family map through therapy and make it a more positive and healthy family map. And I'll show you some of the maps when we get to the paper I shared with you. Jay Haley, wife, Chloe Madden, strategic family therapy, now divorced. So the interesting thing with this is maybe their theory didn't work with them, but maybe it did. So when I ever get a couple in therapy and they say they want relationship therapy or marital therapy or couples therapy or whatever they want to call it, the first thing I tell them is that successful therapy means that they will learn how to be happy individuals. That might mean divorce or separation, if that's what's best for both of you. It might mean remaining together as individuals in a partnership. But, you know, successful couples counseling, to me, doesn't mean that they remain together. It's whatever's most healthy for them. And so they talk about power structures. They have very specific interventions that they used in their theory. I included 2 sheets. Well, I think I narrowed it down to 1. And all it is genogram symbols. And each one has a different meaning. And there's more now. This is an old sheet. But the interesting thing is there's only one book called Genograms, and it has different editions, but there's only one. And they kind of have a monopoly on genograms, but they invented it. So, okay, they can have it. But you might think a book on genograms would be the most boring book, but it's not, because they look at all of these famous people's family and do genograms, and they talk about why the genogram is like this for all these famous people like the Kennedys or Abraham Lincoln, or, you know, they change it up with each edition. But that's what makes it interesting, you know, these real life examples. And so you can look at these symbols in this sheet. And then we've got the paper that I included. And I included it just because it has examples of everything I've been talking about. So I actually took a real family that I had in therapy and I changed the names. There's no identifying factors. But I walk you through, you know, the counseling of this family. And there's kind of, you know, an assessment details and psychological history. family systems, communication, functionality, and wellness. There's all kinds of family structural mapping and designs and power structures, alliances and conflicts. What would the therapeutic interventions be? I have treatment plans, goals, objectives, and I have a sample of a genogram as well. And there's also below the genogram, there's what looks like a legend on a map for each of the emotional lines. And so the red jagged line is anger and conflict, But I wrote why, Jose and John are in conflict and there have been accusations of physical and sexual abuse. John and his sister Alice are also in conflict sometimes. So I actually document what's going on with each of these emotional lines. There is a free genogram program online that you can use, but there's also all of these shapes are available in Word. And you basically just need, squares and circles, basically, and you can draw lines in between them. One of the things people make mistakes about is they'll draw a line down from the mom and a line down from the dad and connect them. But the children don't match up with those lines. They go in between if they're children. There's symbols for divorce. You can see all the notes that I took. There's ages. There's a X if somebody dies. Sometimes you can write down how or why. There's an example of a timeline of critical life events and some references. And yeah, so on the exam, not only will family systems be on there, but you'll have a chance to do a genogram and you'll have a choice. You could either do one with Sam. Maybe we'll just leave it at Sam. You don't have to do your own genogram. But if you want to do a genogram with Sam, it's got to have a lot of detail to get the extra points. So, all right, questions about this theory?